Welcome back, everybody. Off and rolling on a busy. Is it our first overreaction Monday? Probably, with the amount of stuff we had going on over the weekend. Jeff Kolpak will join us about a half hour. Randy Hedberg about an hour from now to chat about Carson Wentz signing with the Minnesota Vikings and a bunch of other topics coming up with Randy at 10:35. For those that have taken a break from football, our next guest has been doing it all year long in this time slot because we haven't been taking a break from FCS football, but now we actually have games to chat about. Sam Herder joins us each and every Monday at 9:35 from Hero Sports BetMGM. All right, I'm going to take you back. If I would have told you in 2016 that Carson Wentz would be playing for the Minnesota Vikings, would your brain have exploded then?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty cool deal for folks in this area for that to happen. And it felt like maybe, just as Wentz has kind of carved, himself a role, as a backup, a quality backup that could step in and be a starter if you had to, maybe at some point he would find his way back to, or not back to, but to Minnesota and back to this, general area. And so that's a cool deal, definitely for him and for Vikings fans.
Just kind of surreal when you think about it. Okay, we actually have games to talk about, so let's peel this back from week 0 before we look ahead to week 1. I want to start with your team. Your team's Tarleton. They made an impression last year, certainly made the playoffs, scared the heck out of USD. No one's surprised they beat Portland State, but did you take anything extra of what they did Saturday afternoon on the road?
Yeah, I think with how they handled Portland State, it was, a bit of a slow grind where, it was 14-0 and then slowly got to 21-0. And then they just kept their foot on the pedal. And it's a type of dominating win that you want to see. If you're a Tarleton State, had they won 24-7, you would have went, okay, they won pretty decisively, on the road, but nothing too impressive. And, Portland State's, they've had their struggles, certainly, but they haven't been, god awful. They pushed, some of the top, Big Sky teams. They pushed teams like Montana, in past seasons. And so, you expected Tarleton to win, but to win this handily, I thought was impressive. It doesn't necessarily vault them up to a top 5 team or anything like that, but being able to handle their business like they did, and we saw some flashes of some new players, stepping up. Tylan Hines, I thought was going to be a really good running back for them. A Hawaii transfer. He went down, with an injury. His elbow bent the way it was not supposed to bend, so it looked like a pretty bad one. But a retro freshman, Trey Page, he steps in, lightning fast guy. 150 plus rushing yards for him, a couple of touchdowns, and it really showed just the overall skill level for Tarleton State to be able to roll out there and get 40 points on the road.
Well, let's overreact because it's Monday. With what happened with the Word, which we'll get to in a minute, are they not maybe considered top 6, top 7 team now with what happened?
Yeah, I think so. You have to bump them back, and it's obviously still early and things can go a lot of different ways for UIW because they have a tough non-conference schedule, coming up. They have, Eastern Washington this week, which can be tricky.
Yeah.
I think UTSA is their FBS opponent. Then they play Northern Arizona and Abilene Christian, 2 ranked teams who were playoff teams last year. And so if UIW can win all 4 of these next games, all of a sudden
that changes everything.
UIW is back, and if Nicholls keeps on winning, all of a sudden Nicholls is in that conversation of maybe Nicholls is a top 15 to top 10 team, just with what they did. But it could go the other way for UIW as well, where they lose 2 more times and they're sitting at 2 and 3, and they're really falling back in the rankings, and perhaps by that point not even ranked. And for them to be a preseason top 5 team, again, with those of us that publish our ballots, it's some casual fans might think it's just throwing a dart at the wall and seeing what sticks. But, on paper, we do rank things out, and UIW made the quarterfinals last year. They retained most of their top talent. They brought in a ton of proven FCS talent. And so on paper, you go, yeah, UIW could be a top 5 team because who else is going to be a top 5 team? Is it Davis? Is it Illinois State? Is it Tarleton? Is it Rhode Island? I don't know, probably not. So let's put UIW there at number 5. Obviously those of us that did that, including myself, we were wrong there.
Raise my hand too. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Again, maybe they recover fine and they figure things out, especially on offensive line protection and, quarterback play, feeling some pressure with more experience. Maybe they turn things around, but as of right now, UIW, certainly had a lot of preseason hype, and they deserve to fall back for the time being, and we'll see if they stay back or if they can rise back up.
All right, let's talk the game we previewed last week. We had Mike Jacobs, head coach of Mercer, on Thursday. I was all ready to go with Mercer and UC Davis. And for those that didn't see the game, Mercer was getting its doors blown off. Davis was up by 20 points before Mercer started to put a comeback together. Got it within 6, Sam, and then Mother Nature intervened. Lightning delay comes in 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and they called the game a no contest because the weather wasn't going to relent. So it just doesn't count. None of the stats happened, apparently. We remember last year, we're talking about Portland State, when USD's game didn't happen and how big a deal that was for USD. These are two teams that have high playoff aspirations. I'm really, really interested to see what happens now because this game doesn't count.
Yeah, probably a tough decision. I think it was, probably a lot of conversation between both schools to come to what is the best decision. And, some people, might say they should have played it in the middle of the night if they had to, or resume play, the next day on Sunday. But I also get from a player protection standpoint, like all these, after you play your first game, you're going to be so incredibly sore, and to strap it up again the next day.
Yeah.
It can be, I don't want to say dangerous, but it can maybe put some of your players in harm's way. And obviously lightning, what is it? If there's lightning in a whatever mile radius, like that's another 30 minute delay. So it probably just kept on getting pushed back. And you couldn't really declare a winner because UC Davis was dominating, but then Mercer was coming back, and they had just blocked a field goal. They were somewhat driving near or past midfield. And so you felt like, Mercer probably felt like they probably could have won that game. UC Davis fans are probably going, well, we shouldn't have had that field goal blocked. We had that misfit on the long touchdown run. Like, well, we would have figured out a way to win that game, but to call the no contest, I think it's tough because, like you said, if UC Davis is fighting for a top 8 seed, come November, now they have one less Division I win. Or for Mercer's perspective, this would have been a huge win for them and the SoCon.
Correct.
This would have been huge for the SoCon to say, we deserve to have our third team in because we beat, a top 3 team, out of the Big Sky. And now it's just, it doesn't matter. Like, I think to a certain extent, us as voters, like we can still be like, okay, if UC Davis goes on to finish whatever 9-2, whatever it would be, we could look at Mercer and be like, well, Mercer was right there with UC Davis.
Right.
Like, you can still put some stock into how this game unfolded, but as far as like overall record wise and on the playoff resume officially, like it doesn't count, which is just weird because 80% or whatever of the game was actually played.
Well, and that's the thing. Our eyes saw it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When we get to November, and if this is like, okay, it happened, we can go back and watch the game up until, it's not like with the South Dakota Portland State instance. It's a bad break, and I feel for the Mercer guys that they were rolling, that they had a chance maybe to come and get that game, and now we'll never know on that. We do know, and you mentioned this earlier, UIW is 0-1 because Nicholls kicked the crap out of them. They are, if we're doing this each and every week, Sam's going to pick one team to highlight from the previous weekend. They're your team of the week, but holy cow, what a debut for their new head coach, and that's a great way to start, especially it's a conference win to start too.
Yeah, it's great for a Nicholls program that, from the late 2010s into the early 2020s, they were, routinely in the FCS playoff mix, and they fell back, the last couple of years. So this is huge for their program. They had a pretty good crowd on hand, tailgating, look great there as well. So this is a huge boost for their program. And they struggled last year. I think they finished 4-8, but their defense was really good, especially their front seven. And most of those guys were coming back, along with Joe Mason, who was a standout 2 years ago. He missed most of last season. He's back, and they just gave UIW, a heck of a time. And I think once they recognized that Richard Torres, who has a talented arm, but he's inexperienced, and he didn't feel the pressure, whether it was pre-snap reads, whether it was the lack ability to change pre-snap protection, or maybe it was just the offensive line or the running back missing assignments. It's hard to tell, but oftentimes they would blitz. Nicholls would blitz off of the blind side, and Torres just did not see them coming at all. And UIW has great talent on the offensive side of the football. But that is kind of the one variable we've talked about is 4 of the top 5 teams in the FCS have new starting quarterbacks. And everything on paper told us that UIW was going to be good, but quarterback play just wasn't there. And Montana State, South Dakota State, North Dakota State's really good looking roster. Quarterback play isn't there. That just changes the trajectory of any of those teams. And so I think that is a glimpse ahead of the unknowns when it comes to the quarterback. It can make your season or it could break your season.
And just one quick word here. UIW's offensive line couldn't block anybody. I was watching some of the highlights on Saturday night and Sunday. Like, Mike, you could drive a freight train through there. That no wonder Nicholls got to the quarterback.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest question marks too with UIW was, they brought in great talent and retained great talent, but did they do enough to get better on the offensive line? So far, it doesn't appear so.
All right, so now that was week 0, and now we're on to week 1. The games begin Thursday. Sam's each Thursday or on Monday's show is going to give us his spotlight games for the upcoming week. So I'll turn it over to you. What are you looking forward to for some spotlight games this week?
Yeah, 2 ranked matchups to open this weekend when it comes to FCS versus FCS. You have number 15 Sac State going to number 3 South Dakota State. I mean, this is when I ranked the best non-conference games, I had South Dakota State going to Montana State. But I think this one
pretty good too.
Easily could be number 1, just with the intrigue of what South Dakota State is going to look like. They have so many new names, but at the same time, it isn't a brand new roster for South Dakota State because they do bring back great experience on the offensive line and defensive line and at wide receiver. And, some of the linebackers people will learn about, they've been in the system for 3-4 years for South Dakota State. Sac State is pretty much a whole new roster. They're going to have a same look offensive line, but, quarterback, running back, defensively, Sac State, they just brought in so much talent, and how all of that gels, we'll have to see because they have so much experience at running back that they brought in, a couple of 4-star wide receivers, 4-star quarterback. Like how that all gels for Sac State is going to be fascinating. Number 25, Richmond goes to number 14, Lehigh, a Patriot League, matchup, which is interesting there. And these 2 teams met last year in the first round of the playoffs. Yep. Lehigh, got a win in that first round. Lehigh brings back most of their team from last year. Richmond loses quite a bit, so you kind of like Lehigh at home here. Another one, Eastern Washington at number 5, UIW. For those curious, we don't for the top 25, we don't rank again until next week.
Right.
So there's not going to be a new top 25 this week. And so as it stands right now, UIW is still the number 5 team, in the country. They can't fall to 0-2.
No.
If their offense can't get it going against Eastern Washington, who has struggled on defense, that's a huge, red flag right there. Then the last one, Campbell going to number 9, Rhode Island. Rhodey looks like perhaps the top team in the CAA. Yep. A lot of experience back. At the same time, Campbell has had some upsets, in the past. They beat Western Carolina last year, I believe, in the non-conference. So that's another intriguing one too. That's maybe a bit under the radar.
How about on the FCS? And this is sorry off the top of your head. FCS versus FBS games this weekend. Is there 1 or 2 you got your eyes on for potential upset? Everyone's going to look here. South Dakota, Iowa State, UND, K-State, and those in our own backyard. Is it those, or is there another one that's caught your attention for a potential upset bid?
Yeah, I'm curious about Tarleton State going to Army, just to see what they could do there. South Dakota at Iowa State, I think could be interesting. It'll give us a great look at South Dakota's new offensive line.
Iowa State's D looked legit. Watching that game on, I know the conditions weren't great, but the game in Ireland, they took it to Avery Johnson and K-State. That might be a struggle for you. We'll see with USD.
Yeah, I'm really curious about Idaho at Washington State.
Yep, I put that down too. Yep.
Late game Saturday on the CW national television. Washington State, I'm not following them too closely, but I see some tweets that there's always scuffles in preseason camp. It kind of felt like maybe there was more than what they should have been at Washington State. I heard that they've closed down practice to media, so I don't want to speculate too much, but I don't know how the former players and the new South Dakota State players coming in, how that's all meshing well. Question mark at quarterback for Washington State. Idaho really likes the quarterback they brought in, Joshua Woods, I believe, from Fresno State, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. They really like him. I'm I'm not calling the upsets just because Idaho also has a lot of question marks, but I really do think that's going to be a really close game.
For those in our viewing area, SEMO plays Arkansas State. Is that one? Because the Redhawks will be up here in a few weeks to play the Bison. Is that one that we keep an eye on or no?
Potentially, SEMO offensively has a lot. They lost a lot from last
Yeah.
year. Their quarterback, some really good receivers, but they always seem to reload every year. It's one of those programs where they make the playoffs and then they lose a lot. They aren't a preseason top 25 team, and that yet they are able to reload and are always kind of they're not a great FCS program, but they're always a solid one that can, win a game, in the FCS playoffs every now and then. We'll see what they have offensively, but, maybe they could turn it into a sort of a shootout like Idaho State and UNLV. I mean, this last weekend,
right.
Idaho State's not a very good FCS program, but they pushed UNLV because of their offense. And so maybe SEMO could be able to do that.
Last thing before we go, if you've missed on Sam's Twitter account, Sam Herder FCS, tweeted out what UT Rio Grande Valley is doing. Brand new team starting this year. Their facilities already have an indoor facility. The football stadium is already better than what Incarnate Word has, way better. How long before we're starting to pay attention to them? Is it this year?
I don't know if it'll be this year or not. They did bring in a good amount of FBS transfers, but this isn't Tarleton State, right? Tarleton came from D2,
right?
So they already have things established. This is a brand new program. They're starting from scratch, but they have the facilities. They have a new stadium, which they bought. And it was an old soccer stadium, but it looks great. They've sold out their season ticket allotment. They've sold out all 40 suites. They're in an area of Texas where there's not any other D1 football competition in a 3.5 hour radius. 2 million people live in that metro. So like you look at them, you go, okay, like they might have something here. I think it might take a couple of years for them to really get going, just because you're starting from scratch here. But this isn't. I know sometimes we look at new FCS programs and we kind of go, that's what is going on here.
Mm-hmm.
This is one where you go, okay, like they're taking things seriously. So we'll see if they can, turn into something within the next few years.
We are off and rolling, buddy boy. Great stuff. Enjoy the week, and we'll do this again next week, okay?
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
There you go, Sam Herder from Hero Sports, BetMGM, recapping week 0 and look ahead to week 1. We'll do it each and every Monday. We have all the off season, so now we actually have games to talk about. Some great stuff there from the weekend. We'll break. We come back, got a couple emails to get to. We'll start our second hour. Jeff Kolpak waiting in the wings. The Bison play football on Saturday. Hot Mic rolls on. We're back after this.